She was laughing in the kitchen when the lawyer called. Barefoot, twirling pasta around a fork, sipping red wine like it wasn't the day after she served me divorce papers. The smell of garlic filled the house. She played music. Something French. I watched her from the hallway, heart pounding, a crumpled napkin still in my fist from the uneaten takeout I'd ordered for one. She didn't know I was there. The phone rang. I recognized the name on the screen, Clifton and Rowe, Estate Law. Her laugh stopped. She grabbed the phone like it might explode. "Hello," she said, and her voice dipped into that velvet tone she only used with strangers she wanted to impress. I leaned against the wall, half hidden, listening. I shouldn't have. But then again, she shouldn't have done what she did. "Mum," she said. "Yes, I'll be there." "Alone?" "Of course." "Alone?" "Of course." She ended the call and just stood there, staring at the floor. Silent. No more twirling. No more wine. Just still. 3 days earlier, we had buried her father. Luther Bellwether, a man so rich he had a helipad installed on his vacation cabin. A man who never said my name unless it was followed by a critique. 2 days earlier, she inherited $379 million. 1 day earlier, she handed me a manila envelope and said, "It's best if we both move on." And now, there she was, trying to look composed, not knowing I had seen the bank notification on her laptop by accident, not knowing I'd spent the night on the floor of our guest room, replaying 10 years of marriage in my head, wondering which parts were real. She didn't see me when she left for the reading of the will. She didn't notice the second car pull into the lot 15 minutes later. She didn't know I was already there, sitting in the corner, watching. And when the lawyer opened the envelope and read the final paragraph, I swear to God, I saw her soul leave her body. The air in that room turned thick the moment the lawyer cleared his throat. Maybeth was sitting 2 chairs away from me, and still she hadn't noticed me. Her attention was laser-focused on the mahogany folder in front of Mr. Dean Rowe, executor of the estate, and a man who looked like he hadn't blinked in 20 years. There were only 6 people present: the lawyer, 2 witnesses, a family advisor, Maybeth, and me, in a gray coat that blended perfectly with the paneling. Nobody asked who I was. Nobody questioned my presence. I guess I looked sad enough to pass as some distant cousin. And then Dean spoke. "To my beloved daughter Maybeth," he began, voice as dry as parchment, "I leave the sum of $379 million. She straightened. "To be held in trust until such a time that her marriage to Ellis is legally dissolved." The sound she made wasn't a gasp. It wasn't even a breath. It was silence, too sharp to ignore. Dean didn't stop. "Should said divorce be finalized before the reading of this will, the total sum shall be reallocated according to Clause 42. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted to the document like it had betrayed her. Dean flipped the page. Clause 42. In the event of premature dissolution of marriage to Ellis Trent Bellwether, regardless of cause, the full estate shall pass to him alone, with the exception of the Bellwether Vineyard, which shall be donated to the State University. The room was silent, utterly still. Maybeth turned slowly. Her eyes scanned the faces in the room and landed on mine. I didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't move. She whispered, "You weren't supposed to be here." Her voice cracked on here, like it physically hurt to say it. I wanted to say 100 things. I wanted to shout, to cry, to laugh like a man losing his mind. But all I said was, apparently, I was. Her hands trembled, just slightly, enough that she set down her wine-colored clutch before she dropped it. She looked at Dean. This can't be legal." "It was notarized a month before Mr. Bellwether's death," Dean replied. He was clear, extremely clear. In fact, he reached into the folder again, pulling out a white envelope sealed with red wax. "This," he said, "was addressed to you." She stared at it like it was ticking, and when she finally opened it, slowly, like she expected it to explode, her face turned pale for the second time that week. I know, because I watched her lips move as she read the first line of the letter. It said, in her father's cruel, unmistakable handwriting, "I warned you, Maybeth." She didn't finish the letter. At least, not in front of us. Her fingers clenched the paper like she wanted to crush it, but couldn't risk tearing the words. Her eyes never left the page, though they grew wider with every line. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Maybeth wasn't the type to cry when anyone was watching. I wanted to ask what it said. I wanted to snatch it from her hands and read every word aloud. But I waited, watching, listening. Every second she didn't speak felt like a nail driven deeper into the truth. Dean folded his hands on the table. That concludes the formal reading of the will. All assets will be processed accordingly. Mr. Trent, he looked directly at me. Your confirmation signature is required for the release of estate assets. Maybeth flinched at my name, like she thought it had been erased already, like I no longer existed the moment she filed those papers. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The weight of her father's words still hung in the air. I'd like a moment, she finally said, voice tight. Dean nodded and began packing up his documents with cold efficiency. The others left quietly. No one said a word to her. No comforting touches, no sympathetic glances. It was as if they all knew something I didn't. When the door clicked shut, only the two of us remained. Maybeth didn't look at me at first. She just stared at the letter again, then folded it with trembling hands and slid it back into the envelope. She placed it on the table between us, like a loaded weapon. I didn't think he'd do it, she said finally. Her voice was low, hollow. He always threatened. But I thought it was just control. So you planned to leave me the second he was gone? I asked, not hiding the sting in my voice. The moment the money landed? I filed before I knew the amount, she said too quickly. You think this was about money? I let out a bitter laugh. Maybeth, you changed the passcode on your phone the day after he died. You started sleeping in your robe. You stopped talking to me. And then I find a packed suitcase in your trunk. Her lips tightened, but she didn't deny it. You never loved me, I said, quieter this time. She looked up at me sharply. Don't say that. You have no idea what I've sacrificed. Sacrificed? I blinked. What the hell did you ever sacrifice, Maybeth? You married a guy beneath your world. Your father hated me. You had servants sneer at me in my own home. And now I'm the one sitting here with a fortune I never asked for, because the only person who believed in me was the man who hated me most. She opened her mouth, closed it, then stood up. You don't know what he was like, she whispered. Not really. Not the way I knew him. There was something raw in her tone. Something unspoken. I rose too, heart thudding in my chest. Then explain it. Because from where I'm standing, this looks a lot like revenge. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, without a word, she pushed the envelope with the letter toward me and walked out the door. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was loud, deafening. I sat down, picked up the letter, and unfolded it. And by the time I reached the second paragraph, I realized this wasn't just a divorce. It was a trap. The handwriting was unmistakably his, sharp, angular, aggressive. Even his penmanship carried weight. I braced myself for insults, accusations, or maybe one last dig at my middle-class mediocrity, as he once called it at Christmas dinner. But the first line caught me off guard. If you're reading this, Ellis, then she did exactly what I expected. I read it again, then again. The paper felt heavier in my hands, like the ink itself carried resentment. This wasn't a goodbye letter. It was a warning. I knew Maybeth would leave you. She's more like me than she wants to admit. But don't be too quick to see yourself as the victim. You were always passive, soft. You let things happen and called it patience. But I'm giving you something now that you can't ignore. A game. A choice. I swallowed hard. You've inherited my estate, but not without terms. There's a second letter, locked in the safe at Bellwether Ridge. You'll need the key she carries. You'll know it when you see it. If you open that safe, you'll know the full truth about your wife. And about me. I stopped reading. Bellwether Ridge wasn't just some vacation cabin. It was Luther's private sanctuary, a place Maybeth had only been to once as a child and swore she'd never return. A place he didn't allow staff, didn't allow guests, didn't even allow cell reception. The last time I asked him about it, he stared at me like I'd asked to borrow his skeleton. The letter continued. She'll pretend not to know. She'll lie. She's good at that. Better than I ever was. But if she gives you that key, willingly leave. Walk away. Burn the letter. But if she fights you for it, Ellis, listen to me. You need to open that safe. I lowered the paper and stared out the window. The streets below moved like nothing had changed. Like the man who'd manipulated my entire life wasn't still pulling strings from the grave. I looked down at the last line, written hastily in red ink beneath the signature. The money was never the reward. The truth is, I folded the letter and set it on the table beside me. She knew. She had to know. That wasn't just some random envelope left in her trunk. That suitcase I found packed, it wasn't just a panicked exit plan. She'd been trying to disappear. Maybe not just from me. Maybe from whatever was waiting at Bellwether Ridge. I sat there for a long time, trying to figure out whether I should be angry, afraid, or excited. And then I made my decision. I was going to the ridge. But first, I needed that key. I didn't rush home that night. I took the long way, through winding roads I barely remembered driving. My hands stayed tight on the wheel, but my mind spiraled. Every memory I had of Maybeth suddenly played in reverse. The way she used to hum while folding laundry. The way she always locked the second drawer of her nightstand. The way she never let me pour her wine. Always insisted on doing it herself. Small things. But when someone breaks your trust, you revisit every detail like a detective at the scene of a crime you didn't realize had already happened. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun had just dipped below the trees. The lights were on inside, glowing warm and soft through the curtains, like nothing was wrong. Like my wife hadn't tried to cut me out of a life I didn't even ask for. She was in the living room when I stepped inside, curled on the couch in sweatpants, flipping through a fashion magazine. The sound of my keys in the door didn't faze her. "You were gone a while," she said without looking up. "Had to think," I replied. She finally glanced over, eyebrows raised. "Think about what?" I shrugged off my coat. "The will. The letter. You. Everything." She closed the magazine slowly. "I told you, I didn't know he'd do that." "You didn't know he'd test you?" I asked. She narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" I took a step closer, staying calm. "You were raised by Luther Bellwether, Maybeth. The man made his dog wear a GPS tracker. You didn't think he'd leave strings attached to $379 million? She didn't answer. "I found the letter," I continued. "The one he left you. He warned you. You knew there was more to this." Silence. Then, quietly, she said, "You think he didn't warn me about you, too?" That stung. I didn't even know why. Maybe because she said it with such conviction, like I'd always been the threat. I moved to the bar cart, poured a glass of water, tried to keep my hands from shaking. "There's something at Bellwether Ridge," I said. "He left a second letter. In a safe." She stiffened. Just slightly. "What safe?" she asked, too casually. "You tell me." She stood up, arms crossed. "Ellis, that place is a ruin. There's nothing there but dust and old tax records. He said you had the key." Now she froze. And in that stillness, something passed between us. A shift. The way animals react when they realize the other one's not playing anymore. "What if I do?" she said, almost whispering. "What if I've had it all along?" "Then give it to me," I said. "And I'll go. I'll read whatever's inside. And I'll finally understand what the hell I've been living with." She walked toward me. Slow. Deliberate. Her expression unreadable. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out something small and black. A key. She held it up, dangling it between two fingers like bait. "Fine," she said. "Go." I reached for it. But just as I touched it, she pulled it back. "One condition," she said. "You open it while I'm there." "No." Then no key. We stood like that, suspended in some strange game of emotional chicken. She wanted something. I didn't know what yet. But it wasn't just control. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. She didn't care about the money anymore. She cared about what was in that safe. Because whatever it was, it had the power to burn everything. The drive to Bellwether Ridge took 4 hours, but it felt like crossing into another century. The farther we got from the city, the more the world seemed to forget it had rules. The roads narrowed, the trees leaned in like eavesdroppers, and the radio gave up somewhere after the second gas station. By the time we turned off the highway and onto the gravel path that led to Luther's estate, I swear the clouds looked darker, like even the sky didn't want to be here. Maybeth hadn't said a word in over an hour. She just stared out the window, one hand resting lightly on the key in her coat pocket. She didn't sleep, didn't hum, didn't ask where we were. It was like she'd been here already, mentally, emotionally, and knew what we were walking into. When the house came into view, it looked less like a cabin and more like a forgotten courthouse. 3 stories tall, covered in gray stone, with vines clawing up the sides like they were trying to pull it down. The windows were all shuttered. The front door was wide, wooden, and adorned with the same bronze emblem Luther had worn on his ring, a serpent swallowing its own tail. Ouroboros. Eternity. Legacy. Control. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was suffocating. "You sure you want to do this?" I asked, my voice more fragile than I wanted it to be. Maybeth opened the door without answering and stepped out. Her boots crunched the gravel with a confidence that didn't match the tightness in her jaw. We made our way up the path. No wind, no birds, just the sound of footsteps and the faint groan of the trees in the distance. I unlocked the door with the same rusted key Luther had mailed me years ago for emergencies only. Inside, the air was cold and dry, like the house had been sealed in silence since the day he died. The floorboards creaked like they recognized us. The living room was untouched. Furniture still covered with white sheets. A fireplace stuffed with ash. A bottle of scotch on the side table, unopened, sealed in wax. And above the mantel, a portrait of Luther, staring down with that same smug, knowing look he always wore when someone else was losing. "I hate this place," Maybeth muttered. I didn't reply. I hated it too, but I wasn't ready to agree with her on anything. We found the safe behind a bookshelf in his study, the one room that didn't smell of dust, oddly enough. Everything in there was immaculate. Polished wood, sharp corners, shelves of leather-bound volumes, untouched but freshly cleaned. There was even a faint scent of his cologne in the air, like the room refused to forget him. The safe was built into the wall, disguised as a panel behind a painting of a stormy sea. Heavy, mechanical, no digital code, just one keyhole. Maybeth stood beside me, still as stone. She didn't hand me the key. She just walked up to the lock and pushed it in slowly, like she was feeding it something alive. It clicked. The door creaked open. Inside was a single manila folder. She reached for it, but I stopped her. My hand was already on it. She didn't resist, but she didn't step back either. Her breath was shallow. Her eyes locked on mine. I pulled the folder out. It was thick, heavy, unlabeled. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I opened it. The first thing inside was a photo. Grainy, black and white, taken from a surveillance camera. It showed Maybeth, sitting at a cafe, holding hands with someone I didn't recognize. Someone who looked exactly like Luther Bellwether, only 30 years younger. My fingers went numb. I flipped to the next page. There were more photos, notes, letters, dates, bank transfers, DNA reports. And then, at the very back, a handwritten message in red ink, scrawled in a rush. She knew. She always knew. I looked up at her, but she was already walking away, up the stairs, into the dark, without a word. I didn't call her name, didn't follow her up the stairs, didn't ask what any of it meant, because deep down, I knew that whatever was in this folder, it wasn't meant to be explained out loud. It wasn't about infidelity, or money, or even revenge. This was about blood. I sat down on the edge of the old desk, the folder still open in my lap. The photos were dated, some recent, some almost 15 years old. Maybeth with different people, in different countries, but always in similar poses. Always looking over her shoulder. Always with the same man who wasn't quite her father, but wasn't a stranger either. I flipped to one of the DNA reports, my hands trembling. Luther Bellwether, paternal match, 0%. Subject, Harrison Lowell, paternal match, 99. 8%. My stomach turned. Harrison Lowell. That name scratched at something in the back of my brain. I'd seen it before. A check stub, maybe? No, a foundation grant. Yes. Years ago, when Maybeth had insisted we donate part of our savings to an obscure nonprofit, I remember the name at the bottom of the thank you letter. Harrison Lowell. Founder. Philanthropist. Silent partner in one of Luther's largest shell companies. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't some hidden affair tucked into the margins of her life. This was a second father. One she never told me about. And if that were all, I might have still held on to some version of the life we had. I might have found a way to rationalize it, call it shame, secrecy, a complicated past she couldn't escape. But the last document in the folder didn't allow for interpretation. It was a contract, signed by Luther, by Harrison, and by Maybeth. It was dated 11 years ago, 3 days before our wedding. The party of the second part, Maybeth E. Bellwether, agrees to maintain legal union with Ellis T. Bellwether for a period not to exceed 12 years. In exchange, parties 1 and 3 shall ensure estate protections, strategic cover, and legal insulation for the Lowell Bellwether Trust. I couldn't breathe. I reread the line again and again, hoping it would blur, change, vanish. I was a cover story, a pawn, A publicly palatable solution for a scandal that never reached the press. She married me to bury a secret, one I hadn't even known existed. Footsteps creaked overhead. Not fast, not panicked, just deliberate. She wasn't running. She knew I'd found it. She wanted me to. I stood up slowly, still gripping the folder, and moved to the foot of the staircase. The house around me groaned as the wind picked up outside. The portrait above the fireplace seemed to stare through me now, smug and omniscient. "Maybeth," I called up. No response, but I heard movement, something being dragged. I took the stairs one at a time, the creak of the wood echoing louder with each step. At the top, the hallway stretched out in both directions. Dust hung in the air like fog. At the very end, the master bedroom door was open, faint light spilling through the crack. I approached, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, a black box in her lap. Not crying, not defensive, just waiting. "You read it," she said softly. "I did." She nodded once, slowly. "Then I guess there's no point pretending anymore." My throat tightened. "Why me, Maybeth?" Her eyes met mine. Tired. Resigned. "Because you were safe. Invisible. Because you wouldn't ask questions." "That's not love." "I know." A beat of silence. Then she opened the box. Inside was a revolver. She didn't raise it. She didn't point it at me. She just held it there, resting in her lap like it was part of the conversation. I stood in the doorway, heart in my throat, not sure whether to run, speak, or pretend I hadn't seen anything. "I never planned to use it," she said finally, her voice level. "Not on you. Not even on myself. It was just a fail-safe, in case everything collapsed." I didn't move. "You married me to hide something," I said. "You built a life on a lie, and you let me believe it was love." Her eyes were glassy now, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I thought I could love you," she said. "I really did. And for a while maybe I did. But the lie was always louder. And by the time I wanted to tell you the truth, I couldn't remember what truth was mine anymore." I exhaled slowly and stepped into the room. "You had a choice." "So did you," she replied. The words hung between us. Not as blame, as fact. I looked at the box again. "What's really in there, Maybeth?" She pushed it across the bed toward me. I opened it carefully. The gun was there, small, antique, probably more symbolic than functional. But beneath it, hidden in the lining, was something else. A ring. My wedding ring. The one she'd quietly removed from the nightstand a week earlier after handing me divorce papers. I hadn't even realized it was missing until now. And beneath that, a photo. Us. On our second anniversary. Smiling. Real smiles. Not posed. She hadn't destroyed everything. Some part of her had held on to it. I looked back at her. And in that moment, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not forgetfulness. But clarity. "You can have the estate," I said. "All of it. The house, the money, the company. I'll sign it all over tomorrow." She blinked, stunned. "What?" "You were right. I don't belong in your world. But I don't belong in his either." "Then why come here?" she asked. I held up the folder. "Because I needed to know it wasn't me. That I wasn't crazy. That I didn't imagine the distance. The way you looked through me." She stared at the floor. "You didn't imagine it." "I know." I stood up, walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "But you were wrong about one thing," I said. "I'm not invisible anymore." And with that, I left the room, left the ridge, left the past. The next morning, I called Dean Rowe and declined the inheritance. Told him to donate it to Luther's University, or build a shelter, or bury it in lawsuits for all I cared. Then I packed a small bag, deleted every photo, and got on a bus headed nowhere in particular. For the first time in years, I had nothing. And somehow, I finally felt free. Not rich, not respected, but whole. Because sometimes, the real inheritance isn't money or legacy. It's walking away with your soul still yours.